Hi, David Goldberg here. Before we start this episode, it is my duty and my obligation as a former law enforcement professional to acknowledge the tragic loss of two Virginia Beach, Virginia officers, Christopher Reese and Cameron Gervin, and another officer from Pennsylvania, Officer Durante, who tragically lost their lives several days ago. I send my sympathy to their families, to all brothers and sisters in law enforcement throughout the country, and may their names and memory never be forgotten. Thank you. Welcome to Inside the Polygraph. I'm your host, David Goldberg, expert polygraph examiner. Join me as I and my guests break down the facts, fictions of polygraph testing, law enforcement, and so much more. Real cases, real conversations. The truth is always revealed inside the polygraph. All right, well, we're back, Joe.
Yeah.
And now we're going to talk about a lot of people and a lot of my listeners often call me and email me in reference to careers in law enforcement and corrections. Please tell the listeners what the minimum requirements are to become.
Now you're testing my memory.
No, if you know, for your department,
Yeah.
To become a corrections officer or a deputy, because they may want to apply, and I'm sure you have openings.
Yeah, we do.
And,
Yep.
you know, even if you don't have everything, the whole entire list, just basically what you're looking for in a deputy for your outstanding department. That's what I want the listeners to know.
Yeah, so we're just right in line with what the state code requires.
Okay.
You have to, be 18 years old. You have to have a driver's license.
Okay.
Simple things like that. You have to have a GED or a high school diploma.
Okay.
And that's really the basics. I believe there's a citizenship requirement or something along that side. And it's easy to look up the state code as it relates to that. But
do they take
just
a
call
written
the
test?
office. Yeah, well, we listen. All law enforcement, so the Bureau of Justice last year, or I think in 2023, did a study and they came out with a report as it relates to police departments or law enforcement in general, and the real need to change, the expectations of the hiring process.
Right.
And getting down to the nuts and bolts of what we really needed to do.
Okay.
Right. And, some things that were automatic disqualifiers, should they still be automatic disqualifiers? Sure. Like, using marijuana, for example, in Virginia.
That's been wiped out now. Right.
It's, and the main reason is because nobody, especially, after, public outrage with law enforcement is related to, George Floyd murder and the behavior of law enforcement in other areas that it gets highlighted. It's tough to attract people to get into law enforcement to begin with. And so as a result, the BOJ says, there's some factors that you have to look at. One is, what is the culture of your organization? So as I told you at the beginning, I'm really highly focused on
you have high standards though.
Because people are checking you out long before they ever apply.
Correct.
So I encourage people to check us out.
Okay.
Go talk to some of my deputies. You'll see them working at Walmart and other places.
Right.
And go talk to them, and you'll learn a little bit about the culture of our sheriff's office and whether that seems like a good fit for you or not. Right. But the BOJ has also, said that, you got to be mindful about, okay, what kind of testing are you doing? Or, is that necessary? We definitely do a physical agility test, so you got to do a little obstacle course. And but the simplest thing about what we specifically, because every department has something different.
Sure.
Is to just call down and or look up our website at norfolk-sheriff.com, or you just look up Norfolk Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
And there's a list in there that will tell you what you're responsible for.
All right.
But to your business, a part of it is polygraph exam.
And that's what we're getting into next. Very good. So here's what I was going to say. And I do get a lot of questions about that. It's called pre-employment, obviously polygraphs for careers in law enforcement, in corrections, EMS, firefighting, and obviously you do test or have your deputies tested polygraph-wise for their job. Am I correct?
Yes.
And when you were in the police department, you as an investigator, you utilized polygraph tests a lot for your major crimes that you investigated. And would you say that experience with examiners is very important when it comes to polygraph testing?
100%. So, if you have an inexperienced polygraph examiner, you can't trust the results of that, right? And it's not as healthy of a tool for your investigation or what you're trying to accomplish. If you have someone that is really skilled and they come out of that polygraph exam, you're going to get a good sense of whether someone's being truthful with you or not, or if there's other things at play, because that polygraph examiner can sit there and say, listen, this person's got a lot of things going on. I think they're trying to be honest or whatever. And, especially when you have a polygraph examination that also has an investigative background.
Correct.
I think, when you couple those two things, they're able to put the pieces of the puzzle together a whole lot easier.
And I say that a lot, Joe. I say that on this podcast an awful lot, that I think experience counts in just about everything, obviously. But when it comes to polygraph testing, experience and investigative background just means the world. Would you say that without polygraph testing for your deputies, that you would have a harder time finding the ideal candidate if you didn't have it, the ideal candidate for your department? Or because I know there are some departments that don't do polygraph testing in other agencies, but they do have a hard time finding those ideal candidates.
I don't think it's about helping you find an ideal candidate as much as it is a tool that helps you to identify when someone's being dishonest about something. For me, our polygraph examiner certainly has identified things that people were not truthful about. And there's one thing that you have to be in law enforcement is you have to be truthful. Your integrity is everything.
Right.
And in behaving with integrity goes hand in hand with the trust of the community in us doing our job, and the trust in myself as a sheriff and believing that you're going to be honest when you're testifying in court and all that other stuff. We've identified people who had gang affiliations, previous criminal history that was not identified in their application process. I think we find the ideal candidate basically through the application process and interview process, but I think that we find out things that we would not have otherwise found out about as a result of the polygraph examination.
Right. And you also use polygraphs in internal affairs when maybe an inmate might make false allegations against a deputy, or a deputy may, let's say, hypothetically lose the key and lie to their superior, and you need to find out who's telling the truth. Do you find it very helpful in investigations?
Yeah, we don't do polygraphs a lot in internal affairs. But our polygraph examiner works in internal affairs.
Gotcha.
So when there's a need, then it's certainly available. But when we get to a sticking point, right, where we just don't know. So for me, it's like, okay, if I can't and I don't mean me
I
personally, but
understand that.
investigators, really are having a time. Well, shoot, is Dave, I don't know which way to
Right,
believe,
right.
whether, and it's something important,
Sure.
right? Then yeah, it's a very useful tool
Good.
investigatively, as it was, in my days in homicide,
Right.
and sometimes, it just the idea of, hey, are you willing to take a polygraph? Was just the idea of taking a polygraph was a useful tool. Back during when we did investigations. So.
Right. You have some serious challenges as a sheriff, obviously, and there was a serious incident in another jurisdiction that we want to talk about very briefly. And we're not going to talk on this show about guilt or innocence. That's not what this show is about. But as the role of sheriff, I want to know, along with the listeners, how you ensure that this wouldn't happen. And you can't prevent everything. You're not a crystal ball, and either am I in my profession. But in the other jurisdiction, 3 deputies were criminally charged with aggravated either manslaughter or aggravated second degree murder on an inmate. And of course, they're pending trial, and that's going to be down the road. But they were deputies. So as a sheriff and obviously your staff, how would you prevent that as a leader, that something like that, and it hasn't happened, thank God, knock on wood, in your facility? How do you prevent something like that?
So I think like what you said as a crystal ball, you can't always get into the minds of everybody that's in your organization, right? The only thing you can do, and listen, that other jurisdiction has terrific leadership over there. They really do. And, and they have expectations of how their staff will behave. And that's the difference, right? As you can create expectations. Like for us, I've told you what our values are. I told you what, the expectations of our organization. We're going to behave in the interest of public safety, public service, and public trust. Then, and you reiterate those values and you reiterate the way you expect your staff to behave. They're human beings. They make decisions on their own.
Right.
But the goal, in order to try to prevent such behavior, is reiterating what those behavioral expectations are all the time.
Gotcha.
Right? And when you see people behaving outside the boundaries of what's expected, it's holding them accountable.
Gotcha.
You have to have accountability. It's not, you want to treat your staff with care and compassion and value them, right? But at the same time, you also have to have expectations of them. And when they fall outside the boundaries of those expectations, accountability is so important to driving home the message, not just to the individual, but to the organization as a whole, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Right.
It comes down to training.
Sure.
It comes down to the culture of your organization. It comes down to setting expectations. And it comes down to accountability. In fact, Colin Powell, as I mentioned earlier, even talked about, he says, as a leader, you have to hold people accountable, and you have to have the courage and the fortitude to hold people accountable when you need to. And if there's someone that's just not getting on board and you need to fire them, you can't be afraid of firing that person.
Correct.
And in fact, he says, the good followers, as he says, know who the bad followers are. They're just waiting for you to do something about it.
Right.
So if you have a culture of accountability and a culture of, training your folks and making and reiterating the values and how we will behave, that generally insulates you from bad behavior. But it still comes because, but how you respond to it is important. and I know the jurisdiction you're talking about responded to that very swiftly.
Right. They did. And
Yeah.
I'll reiterate that I know that jurisdiction, and they are
Yep.
highly professional.
Yeah.
And what I was saying is nothing negative about that jurisdiction. I was saying on how do you try to prevent, and I know you can't as a crystal ball, but
no, but you have to be consistent,
correct.
Right? And I've had deputies that we have had to let go from my sheriff's office. It was hard because we cared about that person, but when they were caught up in behaving without integrity, right, being dishonest, it's like, okay, well, you can't work for us anymore.
Right.
I love you,
right,
but you can't work here anymore, right? So when we let people go, it's not because we hate the person or we wish them ill, because we don't. It's always hard to let somebody go.
Absolutely.
But when you have to, you have to. And it's that consistency that sends the message throughout the organization of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Right.
And for me, I think that's really what it comes down to. Have you created a culture of, one, that sets expectations, and two, hold people accountable to those expectations? Because there's too often organizations, they set the expectations or identify the values by which they expect their employees to live by. And then they just ignore it when people are not living up to that. Right.
It's about leadership.
It's all about leadership.
It always starts from the top, always.
Yeah.
And that's what I've said.
And I always say that expectations without accountability means nothing.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
If people, the minute that someone's behaving outside the boundaries of those expectations, at a lower, then and you don't do anything about it, well, then you've just set new expectations.
Absolutely. And then others are going to follow.
Right.
And they're going to test the boundaries.
Right. Exactly.
You do an awful lot of charity work in reference to as sheriff. Tell the listeners what kind of charities that you do.
Yeah.
And how they can help in those charities.
Yeah. So one, for the last few years, this year, I'm taking a break, but I was a state chair for special.
Joe, you're taking a break.
Well, this is an election year, so I got to get focused on that.
I got you.
But so Special Olympics has been near and dear to my heart, and Special Olympics Law Enforcement Torch Run. I was a local chair for a couple of years in a row, and then the state chair. Raising awareness. Right. We have people in our community with mental disabilities that should be as valued as anybody else.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, and they're just as important, and they have things to offer. In fact,
they have more love.
They have way more love.
More love, absolutely.
There's not a Special Olympian that I've ever been around that hasn't given me the biggest smile.
I've worked them, so I know.
And giving of their heart, right?
There's not a mean bone in their body.
A mean bone, yeah. And and it's so rewarding. What's great about service to others is how rewarding it is, and it gives back to you.
And they know that.
Yeah.
You know that? They know.
Yeah.
Because they appreciate, 100%. And you appreciate even more because you get a lot back.
So things like that, I enjoy being involved in. I sit on a board for the Virginia Public Safety Foundation, which is the organization that takes care of and adds names of public safety officers who have died in the line of duty, whether it's firemen or police officers or National Guard, at the Memorial Wall in Richmond. I serve on the Opioid Abatement Authority, which is a proud point in my career to be able to serve on something that's working to address opioid addiction across Virginia, and ensuring that the authority is being respectful and mindful of the funds that have been afforded to Virginia to address addiction. Those are just some of the things that I've been involved in, and and have enjoyed being a part of. So
that's good. Fills your heart.
Yeah.
Have you been accused of one of the following in your life, such as infidelity, custody matters, CPS investigations, or serious criminal matters that you're currently being investigated for? At Executive Protection Group Polygraph Service, we have been helping thousands of individuals for over 24 years, no matter who you are or what you have been accused of, with the highest accuracy, integrity, and overall compassion to everyone's needs. We are not your typical polygraph or lie detection service. At Executive Protection Group Polygraph Service, we are certified experts recognized in courts throughout the country, and we stand by our promise to give you full closure and all your needed answers. Call at 757-495-1301 and visit our website at www.executiveprotectiongrp.com to get started. All right. Well, the last part of this podcast is all about you.
Oh, okay.
And what I mean by that is not like the whole podcast hasn't been, but this is more important for you. You have run for sheriff the first time in 2017, the second time you were elected, and now you're on your third bid for re-election.
Yes.
The podcast is all yours. I want you to tell the listeners and the voters that are local listening and those that are able to help your campaign, I want you to tell them, the mic is yours, why you're running for a third time, what your new challenges are, what your new goals are, and how they can help your campaign. And it's all yours, Joe. And I can't think of a better person to continue where you first started running and win all the way till now. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to sit down and talk with you. This has been a pleasure just talking about things and visiting with you, Dave.
It has. Thank you.
For me, why am I running and, what are the goals? Nothing's changed for me since I first ran in 2017. In 2017, I took over an organization that had really low morale. We were losing 18 to 20% of our staff every year, which is high turnover.
Wow.
And low morale. We had an investigation going on with the sheriff at the time. That I'd rather not go into.
Correct.
But, so low public trust
Sure.
In our organization and a focus on programs that, didn't really, look like they would, make a difference the way I would like for us to make a difference. And I go back really to when I saw these changes coming, I asked myself, well, who's stepping up? Who's going to take over to make sure that we start taking care of the people that are getting the job done, as Colin Powell would say, right?
Right.
And I didn't see anybody really stepping up that I felt like really grasped where the culture was of the sheriff's office at the time and understood the need to change that in a way to make things positive for our people. I was focused on three things. Employee morale, inmate programs that were meaningful, and community outreach. Those were the three areas that I wanted to get focused on back in 2017. And so I said, you know what, I'll run, and I'll step up and take on the reins. Not for me. I already retired from the police department. I'm not doing it for me.
Well,
I only ran.
You don't do things for yourself anyways.
Yes. I truly only ran to take care of the people in that organization and to create an organization that our community could trust. And that is still my focus. I still want to be an organization that the citizens of Norfolk can trust our organization to do the job we're supposed to. And the only way really to do that is, remembering who gets the job done, your people, right? So there's an old adage, you take care of your people will take care of you, right? And that doesn't mean that you let them behave however they want, like we said earlier.
Right.
You have to hold people accountable that aren't living up to the values. And so when I took over in 2017, that's where I got focused on. That's what I ran on. being committed to public safety, public service, and public trust. It is still what I'm about. And we've accomplished so much over the last 8 years since I've been the sheriff. And, including we've added camera systems to jail operations, which we didn't have before. We are accessible to the community. I give my cell phone out to every citizen that wants it. They can call me directly, and I get those calls. And I'm responsive. I want my employees to be responsive. But at the end of the day, I had to create a culture where my employees felt valued and cared about, right?
Right.
And where they felt safe, that they weren't worried about leadership in the organization that was out to get them or using them as a stepping stone to get up the ladder, which was kind of where we were. And that started with, creating intense leadership training throughout the organization.
Right.
And we started that early on. Larry Carter, who used to be with the police department and then came to the sheriff's office, was our leadership guru. He's the one that helped me create, the mission statement and a list of our values and implementing that as part of our training and then setting the expectation that I'm not giving you the authority to be a supervisor, to be a boss, or to mistreat people, but to make sure that they have what they need to get the job done. Be an advocate for our people in balance with being an advocate for the organization. And it's worked. It's really changed the way our organization leads. It's changed the way supervisors treat our employees. Morale is up, which I'm very proud of. The employee turnover rate is down, which is important.
That is awesome.
Right? And people come to the organization, they always tell me, there's a family feel
to the
organization, which is really what you want.
Right.
So, and I used to have complaints when I first took over from inmates and citizens about the way the inmates were being treated almost every single day. Now I hardly get any complaints.
That's awesome.
Do complaints still come?
Great.
Yeah. But
that's great.
But yeah, it's rare. And so I'm just looking to continue to build.
Any new goals? Any new goals at all?
I think to continue to it takes a long time to change culture.
Sure.
Right? You don't change culture in a year. And we've been focused on changing the culture now for 8 years, and I want to continue to change that culture.
Okay.
The real goal is for us to be the model for others.
Okay.
Right? Why can't we have a programs unit that others want to emulate?
Okay. Why
can't we run the jail in a way that others want to emulate?
Gotcha.
And so for me, it's moving it up to the next level so that others want to come and study how we're doing it.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the goal.
That's cool.
And to make sure that we continue to lift people up that are real leaders and to build the future leaders for the organization, because I'm not going to be around forever, right? In fact, one of the goals that I had was to get somebody to the FBI National Academy.
Oh, nice.
Right. So, police departments and other sheriff's office send people to this National Academy, which is for executives in your organization.
Correct.
Well, for the very first time in our history, I have someone who's in the FBI National Academy.
Isn't that amazing? That's awesome.
Absolutely. It's one of my captains, and it's a female.
That's great.
Who's been with us for a long time, does a wonderful job. And then I have my eye on someone else to go through it.
That's great.
And this is all about investing in our people.
Sure.
The more I invest in them, the better they become as leaders, the better they become at serving our community. And
they'll feel really proud, because that's a high honor to go to that academy.
Oh, yeah. The other thing I would share is, and I've already talked about the inmate programs we're doing, right? Taking care of our people, morale, inmate programs. But the third is our community outreach. Dave, we've expanded what we do in our community. I have programs like the Senior Watch program.
Mm-hmm.
If we have seniors that live in our community that have outlived their friends, outlived their family, and they're living on their own.
Right.
And when we identify them and they want to be on our Senior Watch program, we will go and visit them. We'll have deputies that go out and visit them, once a month to check on them, make sure they're doing okay, let them know they're not alone in the world.
Right.
it's a really important program. And there's been times we've actually found people in medical distress and
Wow.
we're able to get them help.
That's great.
But the other thing we did is, we kind of copied the program from Chesapeake. Is we have what we call our Senior Fest, where we get anywhere from 700 to 800 senior citizens from Norfolk, and we bring them together with vendors that have services for them at a big event. We serve them lunch. They get to shake hands and talk to public officials, elected officials, like the mayor comes every year. And it's a big deal. It's about, making sure our senior citizens know that they're valued.
Right.
And what can we do to make a difference in their lives, right? If that's our stated purpose, how can we help them? And connecting them to services they may not have otherwise been connected to is a way of making a difference in their lives.
Wow.
But the program that I'm the most proud of is Camp Hope.
Okay.
And so, we run a summer camp every year just so that there's something for kids in Norfolk who parents can't afford to send them to a summer camp. We run a free summer camp. But Camp Hope is different. Camp Hope, is connected to the Family Justice Center in Norfolk. There's only one Family Justice Center in in Virginia, and that's in Norfolk. And there's only one Camp Hope in Virginia, and that's run by the Norfolk Sheriff's Office. And Camp Hope is a national thing. It started in San Diego, but the idea is that you identify children, through the Family Justice Center who are in environments of domestic violence or who've grown up in domestic violence situations, and who have, to some degree, gotten some help for that, and we bring them and offer to them this opportunity to go to Camp Hope, which is a 7-day camp.
And have
fun. Like a summer camp.
And have fun.
But it's also evidence-based.
Okay.
And it's got a curriculum.
Okay.
And it's trauma-informed. And the idea is to help the kids realize that, the things that they've experienced that have caused them anger or anxiety, fear, resentments, that all those feelings are okay and they're understandable.
That's awesome.
And they're around other kids
that feel the same way,
who have felt the same way.
Right.
And so this camp, 7 days, and they get to try out this curriculum that helps them to overcome some of their
trauma,
obstacles in their lives, right, and their trauma, and help them heal. And then we do a monthly or quarterly mentorship where we bring them back together. Okay. We started with 20 children, we're now up to like 33.
Wow.
And what happens is when they age out, we invite them back to be camp counselors.
Really?
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
They're learning these skills.
That's great.
They learn them every year. And then when they come back, the goal is to break the cycle because as long as you've been in the business,
that's right,
that if you grow up in an environment of domestic violence, you're more likely to become a domestic violence offender yourself.
Correct. That's right.
Or a victim yourself because that's what you think love looks like.
That's right.
And so it's about breaking that cycle and helping them understand that's not what love looks like and how do you behave in a healthy way. So it's a big deal. The first time we ever had the camp, all the kids were standing around with their arms folded and kind of standoffish from each other because they didn't know each other and they didn't know what this camp was going to be like, and and they weren't sure. Within 24 hours, they were sitting in front of a campfire and going through the program and opening up and talking about things, and they realized they had a lot in common, and they were laughing and joking. By the end of that 7 days, when they came back and the bus pulled up and I was there, they're coming off, they're hugging each other, they're giving each other their phone numbers.
Because they're friends now.
Yeah, they're friends now. And they were going up to my deputies and say, will you be my dad? Will you be my mom? Kind of thing. And it breaks your heart.
It does.
But it makes you feel good too because that you're making a difference.
Absolutely.
And so, for anybody out there from Norfolk, if you're wondering, what your sheriff's all about. Your sheriff's all about the two things I said in the beginning. One, I've always in my entire life wanted to be one of the good guys, and I wanted to help people. And I continue to do that as their sheriff. and I will continue to behave that way, to behave with integrity, to behave with respect, just getting the job done without bias, taking pride in what we do together. And it's not all about me. It's all about my team and what they're doing and what they're providing, and making sure that I'm a full member of Team Norfolk. We're always there to support the city government and what they're doing, what they're trying to do, and to support our community in any way that we can. And I hope that that's enough reason why they may want to elect me and put me back in office.
Is there a special website that they can go to and donate to your campaign or volunteer or anything? What is it?
So the website for my campaign is pretty simple. I need to update it, by the way, but it's joebaronforsheriff.com, and it's all together. JOEBARON for FOR sheriff SHERIFF, because a lot of times people put an extra R in there. It just doesn't belong in there. And they can go to that. That's my political campaign website. If they want to learn more about the sheriff's office, you can go to Norfolk-sheriff.com, and they can learn more about the sheriff's. Or you just punch in there, Norfolk Sheriff's Office, and it'll pop up. For the listeners, Dave and I worked in homicide together as homicide investigators, and we were working on a double homicide, and we were going out to the general neighborhood where we thought that the victims may have been from, because we really didn't know. We didn't have a lot of background on them. And we pulled in to get some gas in our vehicle, and I saw this guy. I think he was either drinking in public or urinating on the side of the.
He was urinating.
He was urinating in public.
Urinating in public.
Yeah,
I remember
urinating in
that.
public.
Urinating in public. I remember that.
And I remember walking over and said, "Oh man, look, that guy's urinating," and I started to go to stop him and talk to him, and and you were saying, "What are you doing? We're working on a murder."
I remember that. I did. I remember that.
We can't, we got other things we got to do.
Right.
Quit messing with that little stuff. And so I went over, and the guy dashed into this garage.
Yep, I remember.
And I walked into the garage after him, and of course, you being a good partner, you walked in after, even though you were irritated with me.
I was, but I did follow. I would never leave you alone.
And we walked into the garage, and it was a garage full of men. that were in there drinking and having a good time.
They were sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll never forget.
And they all looked at us, and they're going, what's up? And I said, no, I just need to talk to this guy.
That was on Little Creek, I believe.
On Little Creek
It was
Road,
Little Creek. I remember that.
And even though, and I said, listen, I looked at the whole crowd. I said, look, guys, because I said, hey, I'm talking to him because he was out there doing what he was doing. And and everyone in the garage was like, oh, man, give him a break, give him a break. I said, listen, I work homicide. I don't really care about what he was doing, except that he shouldn't do it, right? And I said, what we're really doing is we're trying to figure out if anybody knows, and I gave them the names of the girls that we were trying to track down, where they lived. And does anybody know these girls? And I think because they saw we were going to be nice to their friend,
they gave us information.
They gave us information. They said, "Yeah, they live right
exactly.
here." It was the house
or up somewhere
connected to the garage.
That's right.
They lived in the apartment above stairs.
Yeah, I remember.
Which is where the homicide happened.
Right.
So it was, I had an old captain that I said, "Oh, we got lucky," and he said, no, you make your own luck. And you make your own luck in investigations a lot of times by paying attention to the little things.
And I do. I'm attention to detail like there's no tomorrow now.
Right. And so I think that you certainly learned that from me, that don't leave that stone unturned because you think it's unimportant.
Right.
Sometimes the unimportant piece of information leads to really important information, which it did for us. But I think the other thing I would just say to you, David, is a lot of things that I learned from you. So for the listeners that don't know, is Dave throughout his police career was meticulous about doing notes.
Oh yeah, I still
and
am.
Writing down, in a journal type fashion, the things that happened, for him each day. and just how valuable that is. When I get into it, when I'm doing it, I'm really feeling like I'm keeping track of the things. There's this thing called bullet journaling out there, which is a way of journaling and keeping track of the things that you have on your plate and the things you need to get done. And I always encourage people to look into that if that's something that works for them. But that was one of those things that I saw you doing that I thought was just a great trait, for you, keeping track. And I'm sure you have probably a closet full or an attic full of
I have a whole storage facility of them. I do.
Yeah.
But, and
so we learn from each other.
You're right.
I'm saying.
You're right.
And that's always the way.
But I've learned so much from you. I mean, like, you learn from your religion and you learn from your parents. But with you, I learned, I did learn how to treat people, but I learned extra from you, especially on the street. Because like you said, you get that badge, you get that authority, and some people just take it and they want to just abuse it.
Yeah.
I learned when I was your partner is that badge didn't mean nothing. It was just extra heaviness on your uniform.
Right.
Just because you're going to arrest someone and just because you're going to maybe interview and interrogate, they're just like you. They're just in trouble. Well, I got to tell you, Joe, it's been nothing but a pleasure and an honor. Obviously, anytime I'm with you, we've been friends for a long time. You run in for a third time. I can't think of a better person to be elected again. You saying that you want to always be a good guy. You are. You have held that to the highest esteem. And as I said in my very first introduction, I have learned more from you than anything. I respect you wholeheartedly. And those that wear the badge, no matter whether they're in law enforcement, corrections, EMS, firefighting, they are the good guys because they put their life on the line to help and protect the people that need them the most. And those that wear it with pride. They do it for no extra money. They do it for nothing. Okay. And if they get the thank you, that's great. Sometimes we don't get thank yous, but we still do it on a daily basis. And because of that, Joe, you will always be the good guy. Again, let me repeat that. If you are a Norfolk citizen and you want to vote for Joe when it's time or you want to help his campaign, again, it's joebarronforsheriff.com. And again, Joe, thank you so much. And as everyone knows on this show, the truth is always revealed. We definitely revealed the truth about Joe and everything he stands for. And again, thank you for listening. It's Inside the Polygraph with David Goldberg, and I look forward to talking to you and sharing more insights about polygraph and my other special guests on many, many episodes in the future. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for listening. If you truly liked what you heard today, please be sure to rate the show, share with others, and subscribe for more episodes.